Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to especially thank Mayor Nathan C. and Audra Butler for taking time out of their very busy schedules to join us and share how they think about growth in smaller communities, growing communities, and really what those communities need to think about when growth is on their doorstep. My name is Duke McClarty. I'm the Executive Director of Groundwork Housing for Arkansas. Um, we've been around for about 4.5 years working on housing affordability in Northwest Arkansas. Um, we primarily focus our work on collaboration with cities and towns, thinking like the development environment to build more housing, to build housing quicker, and in ways that ensure quality of life remains for those residents. As I mentioned, we're joined today by Mayor Nathan C. And I've been inspired by the mayor's work in Pea Ridge as growth has come upon his town very quickly, and we'll get some insights from him as to how his community has approached that and grappled with that growth. With the growth. Um, oh, I'm sorry, looking at a comment. Maybe I can switch my audio just after I hand it off. Audra Butler is the Director of Rural Housing for Communities Unlimited. They work throughout Arkansas, throughout some neighboring states, and work directly with communities to try to help them assess their housing challenges. And we're thrilled to have them both today. With that, Mayor C., I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit more about yourself and Pea Ridge and how your community's thinking about growth.
Yeah, dude, thank you very much. And thank you for allowing me to be on this webinar with you. Thank you for all of the work that Groundwork is doing in the state of Arkansas and abroad. It's very, very vital and important to try to get most affordable housing as we can. So I started with the city 23 years ago on the street department. And, during that time, between 2000 and 2010, we grew at 104% in population. And so we felt the growth, we experienced it. And during that time, it was trying to leverage infrastructure. And at that time, it was roads and connectivity and how are we going to keep up with traffic? And we still have that problem today. But the one thing that we did do during that time is we looked at policies and procedures. And if you look at what we did then compared to what we do now, it's really different. At that time, it was, we had mobile homes coming in, we had like larger lot sizes that we had. And so there's a lot of policies that changed. But we also were thinking about, okay, how are we going to afford this infrastructure improvement that we have to be doing? And so in 2004, we implemented impact fees. And impact fees go into help the city keep up with the growth. It's not to 100% pay for any project, but it gives you kind of a down payment to be able to do some stuff in your community as you need to. And so that's one thing that we did during that time. And I was on the street department from 2003 until 2022, whenever I was elected as mayor of Pea Ridge. And whenever I was elected as mayor, I said, we have to change the culture. And we didn't have any apartments at that time. We didn't have really a housing option, if you will. And so today we have apartments, we have townhomes, we have housing options for people that may not be able to afford a single family home, but they still need a place to live in Northwest Arkansas. And so we are there to be able to create that opportunity for them to live in a beautiful community and have a great quality of life. And so through that process, we really, my mentality and my thing is speed to market. Speed to market is huge whenever you're growing at a fast rate. And anytime that you're holding up a project, that's more interest that developer's paying. That's more cost to the developer to be able to make it happen. And that essentially it goes back to the cost of the home or the development in general. And so we had the speed to market and like I guess, mindset in 2023 whenever I was elected. And I said, how can we streamline and get things through faster? And so we changed a few things and policies to be able to make that happen. And during the time of being street superintendent, I was also helping in planning, code enforcement, and being able to do inspections at that time too. I was a certified inspector to help the building inspector because the boom was so fast. We all had to, wear different hats to be able to make things happen. And so a lot of different experiences that I'm glad I was being able to be a part of, and always leverage those partnerships and relationships that you have with your communities that are adjacent to you, and kind of learn from them as to maybe what did work and what didn't work. Again, don't try to counterfeit what they did because it may not work for your community. But you could take pieces of theirs and make it yours and be able to make another great community in the state in which you're in.
Sorry, it took me a second to get to the mute. Mayor, before we go to Audra to get some of her thoughts on her work in emerging communities, do you recall some of those communities that you drew inspiration from and have examples of what
Yep.
you learned and tried to bring to Pea Ridge?
Yeah, so we talked to City of Rogers, City of Bentonville, adjacent cities that were growing, that have grown over the last 20 years. They were once small towns, and they grew rapidly. And so we were trying to find out, okay, what policies did they have in place? Where are we at to be able to keep growing in the way that we are? Now, granted, back in the early 2000s, we were under Benton County planning jurisdiction. We didn't have our own planning people here in City of Pea Ridge. And so Benton County was kind of running our planning for some time there until we actually said, we need our own. Like, we got to have our own people who know our community and who can be advocates for the City of Pea Ridge. And so we did that in 2005 is whenever we actually started that board. And part of that came from Rogers and Bentonville being able to say, you guys need to do your own thing and create your own community from that planning that you can do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Audra, you work in smaller communities, not just in Arkansas, but neighboring states. I'd love for you to share, a little bit about what you see elsewhere when communities are approached with growth, how it's welcomed, how it's planned for, and the role that your organization at Communities Unlimited plays in helping them think about that. Would you mind sharing a little bit?
Absolutely. Thanks, Duke. I really appreciate being here today and being able to talk with everyone. As Duke mentioned, I work for Communities Unlimited. We are a community development finance institution, a fancy way of saying that we have the ability to lend mostly in communities, to communities, but also to homeowners and to entrepreneurs and small businesses. We're also what's considered a rural development hub. So that's again, just a fancy term that Aspen Institute came up with to say that we bring in not just one program, not just one resource, but resources across a spectrum of economic and community development into rural communities. We know one thing about rural communities, and that is they rarely have the resources that they need or the capacity that they need in order to take care of the issues that they find, or to help with that growth, or to stop the loss of population. And so that's where we stop in at Communities Unlimited and bring in all of our resources and strategically blend those to address the issues at hand. We work across 7 states, so from Texas all the way over to Alabama. We have people who live in the communities that they work. So we try not to be the outsider that's coming in and just putting a rubber stamp plan in and saying this is going to solve all your problems. What we really want to do is help build the local capacity so that when it is time for us to step away, they have the capacity and the resources that they need in order to continue the work that we've helped them to start. As far as housing goes, so my program, we're really looking at what does the housing ecosystem look like in a rural community. And it looks different in every community, but we know that regardless of where we go in rural America, there's going to be something within that ecosystem that is missing or that needs to grow or that needs support. In these communities, in rural communities that have the opportunity for growth, rural communities are rarely stagnant. What we're finding is they're either declining in population or they're at that kind of precipice of growth because of the surrounding area or a new industry moving in. And what they need is someone to help them kind of see what that ecosystem is, help them build the capacity, and help them to, identify the resources and get those resources, whether that's financial or, building their own programs, changing ordinances within the community, helping to identify and bring in the resources necessary to make that happen. Just a few examples of what we have done. So we've worked a lot in the Delta in Arkansas. One of the things we did is worked with a partner to help bring in a modular manufacturing facility where we are doing naturally occurring affordable single homes for sale. We're also looking at that as a rental opportunity as well. We're currently in the process of finishing our sixth home in Pine Bluff using this modular design that was developed by an organization in South Texas called Come Dream, Come Build. It's not a high technology manufacturing facility. It is a shop where apprentices are learning to build homes, build modular homes, but then those homes are translated into the community. So, we're kind of addressing two areas there, the need for the development of a workforce around the building trades, but also the need for homes in Pine Bluff. We help communities with comprehensive housing needs assessments. I know that most people on this call are probably rolling their eyes going, okay, we don't need another piece of paper. We need to build homes. But the question I always ask when I'm confronted with that, and it happens in every community I go into, is that, well, how do you know what you need? What type of home do you actually need in your community? And unless you take the time to look at what it is that is impacting your housing, what that larger impact is, then you have a really high probability you're going to get it wrong. And we know that we don't have enough resources or money in any of our communities to get it wrong, but especially our rural communities. So having that assessment and tying it to a plan to get resources is really key. So that's kind of the next step is you've got your assessment, you know what you want to do, let's find the resources to do that. And sometimes that looks like, applying for large HUD grants. A lot of times it looks like, let's find those non-federal, non-government resources that we can use to help stabilize your housing or to help with a program. And how do we do that in a way that the 5 people who regularly show up at whether it's a housing task force or at, just the needs assessment presentation or it's your city council, how do we help them to have the capacity to apply for and administer these non-federal grants? And how does that benefit your communities? We know that that pool of federal resources is often, declining, and rural communities don't always compete well in those arenas. So how do we make people see that it's a benefit to invest in rural communities? And then really, how do we build out the ecosystem? We work with local contractors and emerging developers to help get them to where they are able to work in their rural communities and where it's beneficial and they're making a profit for their for their business. We bring in our entrepreneurship team to work with small contractors and subcontractors on their business plans. We bring in our lending team to help them with capital for larger projects. Our housing team brings in programs like Healthy Homes, which is a federal grant to help with housing repair, or we work with Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas to get the fortified roof program in place in our communities. But we're training local contractors to do that work instead of bringing in, a guy from Texas to work in the Delta in Arkansas, so that money stays local. So it's really about building the capacity of the local communities, and until they hit that threshold where they're able to take over that capacity, supporting them down that path. And it looks different in every community, and it looks different between a community that's losing population and a community that's really growing. So we have to be flexible, and we have to be able to work with communities, and communities have to be able to give themselves some grace, because what worked in Pea Ridge, which they've done an amazing job, may not work if we're talking about Southwest Arkansas and stamps, right? So having some grace, the flexibility to see that there's a difference, but also learning from each other. And that's really where we want to kind of bridge those gaps.
You all are doing such important work, Audra, and I applaud you for your efforts. I think we have several representatives of local government on today's call, and I'd encourage not to add to your already busy workload, Audra, but I would encourage them to reach out, because I think there's a lot of resources that you could bring to bear, and just ideas and thought partner. And I'll extend that to the groundwork team as well. We are not as directly involved with the day-to-day in communities at a level that Audra and her team are, but the groundwork team is available to be a resource. You just bounce ideas, bring best practices to bear. So let us know how we can help. I'm going to ask a few questions of both of our guests, but I would encourage our attendees to use the Q&A function within Zoom. Myself and Isabel will be monitoring that, and if there's something that you're itching to ask, please place it there, and we'll be sure to get it asked. Mayor, one of your approaches to the growth in Pea Ridge that I have really been witness to and think a lot about is your community engagement. How important is that in getting it right? Audra mentioned rural communities can't afford to get it wrong. How do you approach that? How do you think about that? How do you incorporate that into your thoughts for where the city should go? Can you share a little bit about community engagement in Pea Ridge?
Yeah, thank you. Community engagement is huge. I don't care what size you are. I don't care if you're a growing community or declining community. Community engagement's big. That's whenever you have the audience. That's whenever you bring those people in. Like I do Friday morning, first Fridays of every month. I have an 8 o'clock meeting, and it's just an open agenda to bring in people and just talk about what's going on in the community. Is what this does, it gives you a time to set the culture of your community. Where do you want to head? What are you going to go after? What are you advocating for? And kind of get those champions in your community that you're having through the community engagement piece to be able to go and talk to their community. And I say their community, but their hub of people that they can go talk to and share. Hey, I heard this from the mayor of Pea Ridge, and this is what we're doing. Will you help, get the word out about this happening? Public transit's huge for us at this point in time that we're talking about today, is trying to get public transit. And so through that, we were able to do a survey through our community engagement meetings to be able to get more people to be able to do a survey than we ever have before, because they see the opportunity as at hand, and we've already set the culture of needing public transit. And so us as leaders have to set the culture in which we want to see in our communities and be able to embed that into our meetings that we have with our constituents and with our residents that we're going to meet with. The other thing is, whenever you're having those community engagement meetings, let their voice be heard. Talk to them. What do they need to see? Where are we missing? What do we need to have? What can we go after? And, from the housing perspective, I have people all the time that ask me, hey, when can we have another apartment? Because the one we have is full, or they don't have any ground floors and we need ADA, we need 50 and over. And so those are things that I go after and I venture after with different investors and developers, is how do we attract those and how do we get them here? If you don't ask, they don't know, is what I'm going to tell you at the end of the day. If you need something, we were in an executive committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and there was mayors in the room, and they're like, yes, the Northwest Arkansas is booming, and you guys are in the bubble of the great things, but we aren't. We need people to come build homes. We need to create that workforce opportunity. And so I was able to plug them into some different developers and builders to be able to maybe help them with some sustainable housing to come forward. But you know what? There's so many things that we can do in our community. Regardless of how your community is built, you can find good in your community to be able to prosper your community better. And so we are able to look at things that we do I went through CDI at UCA, and Community Development Institute is phenomenal. That's a phenomenal thing to go through. Great relationships are built out of that, but education is awesome to leave there with. And being able to realize that whenever you leave there, you have more people and more resources than you did whenever you went there. And so through that, we were able to connect with different people through Michelle Viney with Communities Unlimited. She was in my cohort. And so she is a connection that we have for Communities Unlimited. And we just have to really think about, whenever we're thinking about our community, is really think about our community and not just a sole purpose of one agenda item, but is what we're doing really going to impact the community? Or are we just listening to a minority amount of people that are just wanting things to be this way? So be careful who you listen to, number one, and let people help you along the way. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, how did you guys do this? What's that connection? Can you get me connected with this person? Because at the end of the day, is what I tell everybody, is everybody's trying to do the best they can do in their communities so we can create the state of Arkansas to be a great state.
That's so great. I mean, we at Groundwork, it's may not be obvious to many here today, but we're also a firm believer in that community engagement. We've, set up a tent at farmers markets. We've gotten out and really kind of rolled our sleeves up and tried to engage the community directly. And just like your comments, Mayor, I mean, we have found that to be invaluable feedback in setting the course for our organization and what we relay to the cities that we work with. Just one more question for you, Mayor. The parks and open plan that the city has engaged in, and I think in some ways led with. Can you give a little more insight into that approach and why parks and open space was a priority?
Yeah, love to share this. This is one of my proudest moments as a mayor, is to create this opportunity. You have right now is the time to set up your open space master plan. And so we got with Wes Craiglow and Megan Brown at ULI, and they came in, did public engagement meetings, got input from the communities, and was able to really put together a very dynamic open space master plan for the city of Pea Ridge. Now, whenever I started 23 years ago, we had one park. Today, after the master plan, I am proud to announce that we have 4 parks. And so we've really created more opportunities for recreational needs for the community. But not only that, but we're creating a social connection for everybody. Social connection is huge. We got to get off of our screens and outside and create more opportunities together. And so through all of that, now we don't have to really worry about shoehorning in parks just in little spaces that we may have. We have 5 and 10 and 20 and 60 acre parks that we have around the city that are earmarked to be green spaces for our communities to be able to use. And so I would definitely say start sooner than later on creating that master plan for your open space. But not only that, focus on all your master plans. Get something moving in your infrastructure master plan for your water and wastewater, and try to really get those started to where you can be ahead of the curve whenever that does come to you. And don't let it just sit on the shelf. Look at it, review it annually, and be able to realize that it's going to be updated. It is a very fluid document at the end of the day, because it really just depends upon where your growth is happening. Like, we didn't see our growth happening out east of town until about 4 years ago. Now that we've opened up a new sewer basin out east of town, we've added about 1,500 to 2,000 homes out east that we didn't even see potential for until we seen that we could do a sewer basin out in that area through a master plan project that we did. And so now we're able to gravity feed 3,000 acres with no lift stations needed into this sewer basin that we've created. So master planning is huge. And whenever you're thinking about developments, think about those as partnerships. Take those opportunities to have a relationship with that developer. We have developers in town that I could text today, I could text right now, and I can get information to and from them and be able to have that relationship with them. And, at the end of the day, I thank them every day for the risk that they took on P Ridge to invest. And I thank them for their investment, not only in the community, but in the events and in different things that we do in P Ridge. So take those opportunities and grow those relationships. And we are only successful by the relationships that we have. And that is what really drives our success, is through relationships.
Well, Mayor, you're really good at relationships. I love to, like, the champion that you are for your city. It's a lot will come available for sale, and I mean, you're out there hustling, trying to find the best developer, the best project, for that lot. And it's really inspiring and fun to watch from afar. So thank you for your work. Audra, you mentioned a modular facility in the Delta that you all helped get off the ground. Um, can you share, a little bit more about kind of what the goals are for that facility, for that approach, who those 6 homes are serving, and kind of what the future looks like for that?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So, like I said, modular housing manufacturing facility, and that sounds very misleading because it is a shop with very few amenities that is connected to some classroom space that our partners at We Center, who are the ones who are actually facilitating this on a daily basis, had started a program to help at-risk youth learn the building trades. I don't know how many of you have visited Pine Bluff recently, but there is an extreme need for housing preservation. There's an extreme need for housing infill. And we just weren't seeing that happening at scale. There are some great partners who are working on it, but there just wasn't a lot of infill happening at scale to help kind of preserve the existing neighborhoods. And so with partnering with We Center, we're able to bring in that modular aspect. So it's not just learning to swing a hammer and being safe in the shop. It's how do you actually build the home at its entirety? How do you learn each aspect of it so that these individuals then either continue to work for We Center to do the We Build homes, or they're able to go out and start their own business or work for a local contractor or a local builder or a local developer in order to make sure that those projects continue to happen in that community. The reason we're focused on modular, and we've kind of tweaked it from what its original plan was, and I will, after this, put in the comments a link to the original CDCB modular builds, to kind of see their volumetric model where they're building these homes to about 90% completion in what they call the farm, which is their version of the shop, and then transporting them to home sites, usually within the colonias there in South Texas. We have smaller streets and bigger trees in Pine Bluff. And so that model didn't work from the beginning with this, modular, volumetric modular, where, we have large modules that are being transported through those streets. So it started as component build, and we're trying to find that kind of balance. We Center's trying to find that balance of how much needs to be built offsite in order to keep costs low and really be efficient with time. And so they're gradually adding more and more to that offsite build. The efficiency of building offsite really helps to, or can help to, reduce the cost. Pairing that with an apprenticeship model builds local capacity, but it also, again, helps to reduce the cost of building a home. So at the end of the day, if you're able to build a home at $100 a square foot, that would usually be $150 a square foot. You've provided the opportunity for someone to get into that home at a lower cost. These homes are for single family home ownership, with a real target on individuals at or below like 100% AMI, really looking at kind of that 80%, that workforce level housing, and helping people to get into those homes without, without really breaking the bank, but also just recognizing that home ownership can be an opportunity for individuals to really grow their own wealth, to have something to pass down to the next generation, and in an area where folks are often kind of locked out of home ownership. And for a lot of different reasons. And we don't have to go into the history of the Delta, but really just providing that opportunity. It also provides an opportunity for us to start looking at, okay, well, what do those single family homes look like if they're for rent? Or if it is a lease to own, but in a way that is beneficial to the person who will eventually purchase that. And working with some of our partners, whether that's CDCB, who has a mortgage product specifically for these homes, or working with other CDFIs who have products that are specifically for a homeowner to buy out at the end of a lease or something like that. So looking at really unique ways in order to do that. And really the benefit here, yes, modular homes are great. Yes, they're a tool that we can use. But what it's allowed us to do is look at unique ways to build homes, unique ways to build out the ecosystem, and other forms of mortgages or lending that help people get into these homes. So it's about, finding those unique ways that work for rural communities where we have fewer banks, fewer resources, and home ownership is kind of the preferred tenancy in those areas. And we're hoping to be able to translate that into other areas. So not just Pine Bluff, we're looking for partners in order to kind of translate this into, whether that's Northwest Arkansas or East Texas or Mississippi, where's that next place where we can take that apprenticeship model, the modular housing model, and tweak it to where it fits those areas. So we are currently looking at what kind of those next steps would be in order to make that happen.
Thank you for sharing that, Audra. Groundwork's been very intentional with trying to identify every lever possible to try to deliver or enable the market to deliver. The mayor used the term speed to market. We're really talking about leveraging the market as much as possible to deliver a lower price point home. So I was aware of your modular work. Thank you for getting into those details. Mayor C, you're no stranger to innovation and new ideas and identifying new levers to pull. Would you mind sharing, some of the learnings and discovery that you've gone through to try to open up every, say, development type, building type available to Pea Ridge as possible?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind is we took a trip in January to Phoenix, Arizona to look at Strata, which is a company that builds homes in Maui after the Maui fires. And they are a styrofoam built home that has Sabscrete on the exterior and interior. They take up to 250-mile-an-hour winds. They're fire resistant. And I am proud to announce, nobody knows this yet, but this crew is going to know that we are fixing to have Strata come to Pea Ridge, Arkansas, and build our very first fire trailer. If you ever go to the fire department and they show you like a fire with a sprinkler system and then one without, they're building us one of those out of this material to prove how fire resistant this material is. Not only that, they're looking at some property to build the first home in the state of Arkansas here in Pea Ridge through Strata. Now, is what this does is 4 guys can go build a home in a matter of 2 weeks using this material. And so speed to market, again, is the mentality. And being able to heat it with a candle and cool it with an ice cube gives you better efficiency for the longevity of the home. Whenever you look at it, whenever we went there was an 11-year-old boy, Jeremiah is his name. Hopefully he gets to make the trip to Pea Ridge and talk to people. Him and his family built their home, and he was in the middle of it whenever I was there doing interviews and just talking to him about it. And for an 11-year-old boy to be able to walk me through the steps of what it takes to do it tells me that anybody can do it. And so we've gotten with our high school, and we're actually going to create a workforce development through the high school to be able to let people build ADUs through the high school program and sell the ADUs for people that want ADUs. Since the ADU law passed, this is a great platform to be able to do that. These are, very easy to build. We look at a couple different tours whenever we were there. Very innovative. We haven't seen anything like this around the state of Arkansas for what they're doing. And so I think that whenever we get there, Duke, you're my number one invitation to come and check it out and be here to see what's happening. Audra, I'd love to have Communities Unlimited come up and check it out and be a part of that conversation, because I really do think that this is a huge lever for us to be able to move to workforce development housing at a very more reasonable cost at the end of the day. And so it's going to be huge. We've been working, like I said, since January to try to get them to commit to do something. And I think we're finally there. I did get a text this morning from Corey, which is one of the capital investors in it. And he said, we got the green light yesterday. We'll see you next week and we'll start planning. So cool. We'll move forward with that. And, like I said, housing options is what we have to look at. Not everybody wants to be in your traditional single family home. Not everybody can afford that. Mm-hmm. That's why I was very, very supportive of Josh Bryant's ADU bill that went through, because it gave options for people that maybe have not got there yet in their trajectory of life to be able to have a $350,000 mortgage. But is what it gave them is confidence, because now they have their own space. Now they have their own home. They have their own responsibility. And that's where we have to get through as a society, is giving people more confidence to where they can go out and be elevated to the next level, maybe in their leadership skills, maybe in education, whatever it may be. But I think that's the grassroots, is getting them into their own space.
That's really exciting. I didn't know we were going to break news today, but that's terrific. And I'll accept your invitation. I'll be there. I also have met with the guys from Strata, and again, I think there is a familiarization curve, that needs to be cleared for the development community to try something new and do something new. And that was, one of the driving forces behind our work with Senator Bryant, with Senator Hester and Representative Clowney on the ADU bill was let's just make things available. Let's get people comfortable with it. Not to take the conversation in a negative direction, but I think we would not be involved in an honest conversation if we did not think about, anti-growth pressures, anti-growth sentiments. Audra, when entering a community, there's, no, say, or aging housing stock. There's no new stock. There's deferred maintenance. There's, maybe the employment and job situation in a community is less than ideal. How do you have, those honest conversations, and what's often included in those conversations as a starting point?
So any community that we go into, or that I go into, it starts with a conversation, an open conversation. Anyone is invited to come. And we've had some really good success with this. The important thing is I go in and I listen, because usually within those kind of negative sentiments, there's something that we can learn that needs to be addressed, right? So often if we're talking about growth, it's people are afraid that they're going to lose the culture within the community that they love, right? There's something about that community that they love that, if we're talking about growth and people coming in and moving into the area, how do we preserve that? How do we keep that voice as part of the planning? When we're talking about some very heavy topics, again, you go into a community and there's blue tarps on roofs throughout the community, and there are people living in homes that are just almost to the point or past the point of being habitable. How do you have those conversations? And it's really, you invite those people to the table and you sit down and you listen. So often, and I've been in housing and in nonprofit space for a very long time. So often we go into a community and we're like, we have this great solution, right? We're going to take care of all your problems. And we don't invite people to the table who are actually the ones that are being impacted by that. And so there's this growing resentment, and that voice becomes louder and louder, and we're not able to kind of get past that. So inviting those people to the table, sitting down and listening, and then finding what's the root cause of that. Is it that every other house in their neighborhood is grown up and has old cars and it's not safe and there's dogs walking around the street, and they're just really unhappy and they feel unsafe in their own neighborhood, and they don't see a way that can get resolved because there's one person doing code enforcement, and they're also working with the city clerk, and they also send out the water bills every month, and so they only can get out to do code enforcement every once in a while, and they don't have the resources to do that. That's a problem we can solve for. What we can't solve for is somebody feels unsafe in their house and we're not doing anything about it. So really listening to understand, and not just understand the two or three people who are always helping, and not the two or three people who are the loudest, but the people who actually live in the community. And that's not an easy fix. And it's hard to get those people at the table. But making sure that when you do finally get somebody like that at the table, or a couple of people at the table, that they trust you, and that you find a way to, even if it's a small win, to address those things, right? One example, I've been working with the city of Dumas in the Delta for a few years now to help them, and code enforcement was one of the things that kept coming up with housing. And once we got past we need more homes, we need to build, it really came down to they had a part-time code enforcement person who had all these other responsibilities. So they have found a way to bring in and support a full-time code enforcement person, or close to full-time, to help address that. But before they could bring that in, they set up a better system for people to be able to go on the city website and submit their code enforcement issues and complaints, so that that person could better do their job. And you didn't have to call and make a complaint. You didn't have to find the time to go to City Hall and take time off work to go down there. You were able to do that. And so people then felt heard, which then, made some progress towards trust of the individuals who are doing this work. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying you have to build trust by listening and then acting on something within that, those complaints that you're getting, and that really loud voice that you're hearing. There's something there. There's something that's driving that. And if you can find a way to at least start addressing that issue, then you're building that trust that's going to allow you to have the time to then do those bigger things. So yeah.
That's really, really helpful. And it sounds like that trust and, back to the mayor's earlier comment around community engagement is just critical, because, so many of these communities have not seen new investment in a long time, and they're skeptical, and in many instances, it's justified. Mayor C, with regard to kind of opposition to growth, would you like to add anything to Audra's comments?
Yeah, to her point, trust is huge. You have to gain trust with your residents. I will tell you a story. We did have a rezone come through for the first apartment building that we had in Pea Ridge, and we had a couple of people that were very, very up in arms about it and said we don't need this growth, we can't afford it, and how we're going to keep up with the infrastructure. Well, fast forward 2 years later, after it's complete, they're thankful that it's there because their son lives there now and goes to NWAC. And so they said, sorry that we were so opposing it. We didn't realize that it wasn't going to hurt our property values, and it actually was going to help us because now our son literally is in our backyard, but yet he doesn't have to be in our home. He's right here next to us. And so a lot of it is, the reality whenever you grow is, I've heard this from multiple different people. It's better to embrace it than it is to fight it, because it's going to happen at the end of the day. But how can we make it better? How can we create it to where it is listening to the people whenever they come in and say, I have a concern about this development because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's do some research. Let's get really some facts that say that it's going to hurt your property values. And let's get in some research as far as, is this going to be an opportunity for Pea Ridge to be able to have another housing option for our community to grow? And, even though you're growing, you still need to listen to your people, listen to what they're saying, because it does matter. And the number one thing that people want to do is be heard and be accepted. And we want to do that right here in Pea Ridge. We want people to be heard and be accepted in our community. We know that growth is inevitable, but there is a certain way that you can, make it to where it is approachable growth. My door is always open. A lot of people tell me I'm too accessible, but I want to be accessible to the people because that's what matters the most, is being able to build that trust and relationship with them, to know that I'm listening and we are working to do things better than where we were 25 years ago. We have a lot of growth to go and a lot of opportunities ahead of us. And so I think that through the process, gain those champions in your community. Start today with community engagements. If you're not doing them, find a platform to go off of and just kind of say, hey, we want to do this in our community. Let's get together. Let's have a conversation, and then grow from there as you continue to have those engagements.
Thank you for that. I, really appreciate that trust perspective, because it really does come down to that. We in a prep kind of email discuss kind of how cities can best prepare themselves, like what can they do to even attract the growth. Audra, do you have thoughts on if a city is to take a first step to try to bring some growth into their community, what does that look like?
Yeah, so one of the things that is going to stop investors faster than anything, or a new business coming in, is if they drive through your town and they see all these homes that are in significant need of repair, right? So we always want to build, build, build. That sounds really exciting. But if I'm an investor and I come through and your existing housing stock is crumbling and falling apart, then I don't have confidence that I'm going to be able to bring my business, that my employees are going to be taken care of in that community, that they're going to want to stay there. Or if I got this great new job in Northwest Arkansas and I'm looking for a place to live, and I realize some of these bigger cities that Fayetteville's too expensive, and I start going out further, I'm going to pick the community that one has homes that I can afford, but two, that those homes are something that I actually want to live in. I feel proud of living in. So finding resources and helping connect those resources to existing housing stock, whether that's bringing in, working with a local nonprofit to apply for fortified roof program through Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, or applying either as a community or in conjunction with other communities to bring in a healthy homes program, where you're addressing the kind of root causes of that kind of housing stock collapse. You're doing housing repairs. You're making a very visible difference in your community so that then I'm driving around going, oh, well, even their older homes look great. Or, oh, there's repairs happening to these homes and not just after, a hailstorm comes through and damages roofs, but like every neighborhood is seeing some improvement. Is that's really where I would say communities can really start having a huge impact on their housing stock. And we are losing housing stock faster than we will ever be able to build housing stock. So if you
Such a
can
good point.
sustain your housing stock, well, then you have more resources then to expand your housing stock at the end. And also you have housing stock that meets your needs now, and then you plan for that future growth as well. So that's where I would say communities could really start having a huge impact, is focus on your existing housing stock. Don't leave it behind as you plan for that future growth.
That's such a good point. Thousands of units every week fall out of habitability across the country, and we're not producing at that speed to replace those. I would just to no one asked me, but I guess have the privilege of having the microphone. Um, I think at the highest level, from a regulatory perspective, make what you want the easy thing to do. Like if you want townhomes, if you want something different, make that the easiest path, and it's approval path, the regulatory path, the least expensive. You reduce fees on what you want. That would be, I think, a really good, just kind of overarching theme for cities to think about. Um, Mayor, as growth has come into Pea Ridge, there has to be a delicate balancing act on the budgetary side of capacity building, with income coming into the city. How has Pea Ridge approached, building capacity? You mentioned the many hats that you once were wearing. I think fortunately you're not likely wearing all those today, but you're probably still wearing a few hats that larger cities, mayors are not wearing. How have you balanced that growth and capacity building through this growth phase?
Yeah, so whenever I got elected in 2023, I hired a planning director because I knew we needed one. We have to start there in the planning stage. And then we hired an additional inspector to help the inspections team. Another thing we did is we went to a online portal for everything to be online. You don't have to come into City Hall because time is money. And so you can do everything from your phone or tablet for your building inspections. And so we tried to make things easier for the contractor, which is easier for our inspections team also. But whenever we were having multiple times a day, people come in to pay fees, and people come in to do, I need to get on the board or inspections for 2 o'clock tomorrow. Well, now you can do that from your work site. You don't have to come in to do that. You can do it from where you are. And so we also did some stuff through our Pea Ridge Connect app, to where, from neglected properties that Audra's talking about, you can go onto the app and go there and talk about different things that need to be taken care of. Take a picture of it and send it out. And so to code enforcement. So I hired a code enforcement officer to keep up with that. I am still involved with site selectors and being able to get developers to come in and have that conversation. And what's huge to me is what's your first visit to Pea Ridge look like? What does it look like whenever you come into our community? And to Audra's point, is it neglected properties? Is it overgrown spaces that don't need to be overgrown? What's it look like to make it attractive? And so over the course of time of talking to site selectors and different people, economic development is a huge umbrella that housing and amenities and public safety and everything falls underneath. Because if you don't have really good spaces for people to stay in your community, then it's less likely to have attraction for site selectors to come in and build that national brand, because they don't see where people are staying there to be able to come and trade in their place of being able to have that conversation with people and workforce development. And so you have to have the number of houses before you can have the commercial come in behind it. And so whenever you're thinking about, oh, we need that next commercial space, but we don't have enough housing, start with the housing and commercial will follow. It's almost like a teeter-totter. And then once the commercial gets there, you're going to have the housing, and you're going to have to really learn how to manage both at one time. That's where we are today in Pea Ridge, is we're trying to manage both and be an attractive city to both. We don't want to say Pea Ridge doesn't need any more housing. Pea Ridge needs more commercial. We need to be attractive to both and create it to where they complement each other at the end of the day. We have to create developers and investors to see that we care about people having a good quality of life, and Northwest Arkansas is a place to have it, and the great things that are happening here. But whenever we're having these conversations, we have to realize that who can we help along the way? And so City of Garfield's reached out and being able to have a connection with them of regional connectivity, and City of Bella Vista's reached out, and how do we create this? And so if you're in a community where maybe the neighboring city's growing, you might want to prep for the growth because it's going to hit you eventually. And prep now, that way you're prepared for it to come. I've always said it's cheaper to be proactive than it is to be reactive. And so be proactive to the growth. If you see a trajectory coming, try to act pretty quick to be able to say, we need master planning. We need to find out, okay, do we want apartments? Do we need duplexes? What do we need to look at as far as the housing need for our community? And I think Audra mentioned it earlier. Grab a hold of Communities Unlimited and let them help you with that housing need and assessment to where you could see what you need to have in your community as you grow. And you're not just listening to people say, we don't need this or we don't need that. Let the study and let the survey say what you need.
Such great advice. I'll make one more call for any questions in the Q&A function. But with that, and we'll see if we get any while we kind of wrap up. I know we're coming up on our time limit. Audra, do you have any kind of final thoughts or wisdom that you'd like to leave our attendees with today?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mentioned earlier that our organization has several different resources that we bring in, and one of those is water, wastewater, and community infrastructure team. I mentioned that because I have learned that water and wastewater systems, especially those smaller ones, have been really great to regionalize their efforts, right? Coming together to either regionalize the entire water system or pool resources. What we don't do well in housing is regionalize our efforts. So for smaller communities, if we can start working together as the mayor said, learning from each other, but also, can we put in an application for a larger grant as a regional approach to housing that is focused on communities of similar sizes and be more competitive and regionalize our efforts. And we haven't been great about that in housing. I will own that. We're not good at it, but I think we're going to have to be good at it, especially as we see regions like Northwest Arkansas that are really growing and smaller communities are taking the brunt of that. I also, kind of as a plug here, sit on the board of a statewide coalition, A Change, for affordable housing providers and partners. Get to know your state and regional coalitions, whether it's housing or economic development, whatever that is, and have somebody within your community or within your government and your municipality involved in those and staying active in those and building on those partnerships. And then know and have a relationship with your local organizations, whether that's the housing authority that's serving your community. Man, they have a lot of resources that aren't being utilized. Push them to utilize them and push them to utilize it in your community, right? Make those connections and then really build strong relationships, whether that's a nonprofit or housing authority, local builders and contractors. Mayor C mentioned that earlier, that those relationships are really important. Take advantage of those relationships. And then when there are resources available, nudge nicely, but forcefully for those people who can get those resources, to get them and bring them into your community. Because otherwise, we're all going to just continue to do the same thing, and we're going to continue to miss out on the resources that are there. So I think those are kind of my big takeaways. Work with your neighbors, build out your regional and state networks, and then, really push for the people who can serve your community to actually serve your community.
That's great, Audra. Thank you. Relationships are just so important to this. Really appreciate you doubling down on that in those final comments. Mayor C, anything we didn't touch on or that you'd like to leave the group with?
One thing I want to say, if we have elected officials on the call, collaboration. Create collaboration in your region. Benton County does a very, very good job where we have a mayor's call once a month. All the mayors get on the call. We talk about whatever we have going on in our communities. How can we help each other? I'm dealing with this. Have you gone through this? How can you help me through this? Create that collaboration within your region. And, as Audra says, regionalizing is huge. If you're looking at water or wastewater, man, I'm just going to tell you, regionalizing is where you're going to get some money from ANRC to help you out. Create those opportunities and create some consolidations if you have to for that infrastructure. I know it's not attractive to do that, but create some regional connectivity for that to happen, and leverage all you can on your nonprofits. And, whenever you think about housing, Duke McClarty is probably the top guy you need to contact and have that conversation with him and say, hey, how can you help me out with this? And because the resources that are at hand, we have no clue of what resources Audra has all together, what Duke has all together, what each of us have together as valued. And so we have an opportunity here that if everybody on the call came together and said, hey, I'm having this issue, by the end of that conversation, we would probably have a resolution to the issue you have because of the resources that we have on this call. So don't hesitate to reach out. If I can help out, I would be glad to, be honored to be able to help you out in any way I can, get you connected. And again, thank you for the call. Thank you for everybody that's on it. And it was great to be here. Audra, great to meet you. Great to hear your stories and your successes. Celebrate those. That's huge wins for Communities Unlimited. And again, I appreciate everybody and great call.
And come to P Ridge, right?
Come to P Ridge. Let's go.
Just a final comment from me. First of all, thank you all. I know many of you, don't have an hour to spare, and you gave us an hour of your time this morning. So thank you. Many of the subjects that were touched on today, groundwork is thinking about, elevating these and thinking of the role that the state could potentially play to, again, using the mayor's comment, speed to market, to bring housing online quicker and less expensive. Everything from vacant and abandoned properties to modular and factory built homes. Different building techniques are all on our radar. So look for more as we formalize those policy thoughts. If you have input on those, please reach out. But you can sign up for our mailing list at groundworkar.org. We will send out a recording of this if you registered for it, and it will also be posted on our website at groundworkar.org. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much to Mayor C and Audra for joining us. And let us know how we can help, and have a good remainder of the week. Thank you.